Hello and welcome to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm joined today by Hudson Byblow. Welcome.
It's nice to be here. Thanks.
It's great to have you on the show today. I'm really excited for this conversation, and I guess we should just jump right in. Can you just start by sharing your story with our listeners, and we'll take it from there with the different topics of avenues of conversation that we want to explore?
Sure. The story is ongoing because the Lord works on us for our whole lives, of course. But the point where I know you're angling here is the story that I used to embrace an LGBTQ plus mindset. At one point, even self-identifying and defining myself as gay, and then trans. After that, this is already quite some time ago, and I was brought into this just through, um, let's say, cultural immersion, you could say, in a sense, plus me trying to navigate the experiences that I was having when I was younger, feeling drawn in certain ways to this, feeling alienated from boys in this way, and that kind of thing. And basically, what happened was I started entering into a journey of discovering my Catholic faith, which I hung on to by like a smidge in those years, right? And I was challenged with the idea that maybe the church doesn't hate me, right? And it happened when there was a priest from the pulpit who insinuated there's more to learn about this, because at the time in my life, my early 20s, I was like, well, first of all, I know everything there is to know about the faith, right? Because I'm a really spry, whatever, 20 something. And then he inspired me to look deeper, right? And no one had ever done that before. Up until then, I had just sort of just like soaked in whatever. And I was formed by the things around me without questioning it, really. And so I started digging, and I learned really quickly that there was a real invested effort to have people who experience a particular desire or attraction to absolutely claim the idea that it implies your identity is this or that. And the only place I didn't find that type of like real push was inside the writings from coming from the Catholic perspective, because at this time I was digging into everything. And I was really geeking out on math at the time, and like equations and algebra and stuff like that. And one of the parts of that was, like something equals something else. That's a balanced equation. Well, something also can't equal its opposite, right? And so it was really foundational for me to say, hey, there's something more to the picture here, was recognizing that the attractions they did not choose, right? That's different than how I choose to see myself, right? Because one is not choice and the other one is choice. And so I looked at, basically, it lifted my perspective to consider things like, how is my mindset formed, right? How and lifting the language past identity itself, and to saying, like, what a person expresses as their identity first originates in the mindset they've embraced, because the mindset governs, how you will respond to the things that are brought into your life, right? So yeah, it got me thinking, and it was also assisted by I was at a conference, and there was a super mega gay activist guy who told a whole batch of professional educators, the whole song and dance about people being born this way. And when I talked with him after his seminar, there was witnesses around. It was kind of fun. I challenged him the idea that um, born this way, because everything that I had read didn't what I had read particularly, I guess, challenged that. And then this guy in that position confirmed it, saying his words, environment plays a factor in the development of our attractions. And I'm like, this is coming from like a super mega gay activist, like the kind of guy who influences the policies that are being written in our country. Okay. I don't want to say his name because I don't want to get sued yet. But anyway, I was like, if a guy like this can say this, why do I have to fight back inside even Catholic circles on this, in the battle of born that way or not, and bloody da? It just it was just really disheartening to kind of think of that angle. Although I kind of really was even inspired to dig up even more once that guy said that, and to understand the role of experience and how it impacts our appetites. And by the way, like attractions, you could say a sexual attraction or romantic attraction are a form of relational appetite. Boy, if I could wave a magic wand and flip one thing in the world, it'd be that people would talk about attraction, sexual and romantic attractions, is a form of appetite. Why? Because everybody knows that our appetites are influenced by our life experience, right? Anyone who's had a bender on like Long Island iced tea when they were 16, like I did, I know I can't do it anymore, right? So, but anyway, and God just put like all these like people and experiences in my life to basically say like how you were formed without having the awareness to see beyond it was missing some pieces. It was missing, let's say, the truth that um, uh, it, who you determine who you view yourself to be is a matter of choice. And also the other thing is that yes, people's stories of the truths of their lives are important, and I believe everybody's story matters. But our stories play out in an arena of reality, right?
Mhm.
And I was driving one day. This is one of my favorite analogies because I love old cars. Um, I'm driving by this old car, and there's like I pulled over to take a picture of it. It's a beautiful old car. There's like a tree growing through where the engine used to be, and it's nature's winning over, right? And it was like, oh my gosh, like this is what after I was wrestling with the whole my trans stuff. It's like nature can take over a body made of steel. Nature's gonna win back a body made of flesh. Like I can't beat that battle. And I was
Wow.
like, who am I kidding here? Trying to like push back. I mean, I could push back, sure, but like I was tired by then,
Yeah.
and I realized it was an impossible thing. And so it was like instead of pushing back and being in this impossible battle and never having the interior peace, maybe I need to examine like why I have that dissatisfaction within myself. Why do I not see myself as worthy of being among men? Why do I feel like I don't belong with the men? Why do I feel like I long for the approval of other men? Now I'm flipping from the transgender to like a lot of the same sex attraction stuff, and like
Mhm.
how it was like I desire to be chosen by them. I desire to have, you know, to belong in that wolf pack,
Can
which
you explain
never
for
happened
okay,
when I was little. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I just kind
No,
of
you
like
were
went
saying
right
that
into it.
no, yeah, it's great. So you said that environment plays a factor in pushing people down these paths of different attractions. How did that play out in your life? Were there any like specific turning points for you? What did that look like?
Oh, sure, yeah. So that whole thing about environment plays a factor in development of attractions that came from that gay activist guy. And that really spurred me on to think about some of these things. And one of the biggest ones, I mean, so this is retrospective now, looking with the eyes of the adult and like seeing how these
Mhm.
impacted me. Um, I came from a family. I believe I have a nice family. I love my family, and I like. But I have an older brother, and we played together, and he was 3 years older then, and he's still 3 years older than me now today. Ha ha, that's a joke. And he when I played with him all the time, he always won. And so I remember finding my place not as first place. If I was ever on like a breakaway in hockey, or if I had the ball in basketball, or if I had a chance to lead, I just didn't know what to do. And I realized that I was very much formed in being like the assistant or like um, second runner up. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
found I knew the place. The place became familiar, became safe. All the while, it wasn't good for me to be there. And it also, I can see now that I've spent a lot of time examining things like anxiety, is that to be outside of that place brought me to a state of anxiety. I didn't want to take the lead, right? And I didn't want to take risks, even risks that would have been good for my own formation and development. And so I stayed kind of scared, you could say. Anyway, so I found my place was second place. Another thing that happened around age of 9, at age 9 I was exposed to I was exposed to pornography. I was going to say online porn, but that online didn't exist back then. I was exposed to pornography when I was 9, and I remember seeing it. It was porn to me, I'll tell you that, but it was just part of a regular like after dinner program that had a little feature on Russian strippers. Like what else could you put on at the dinner hour on a primetime channel? And I got I got so like infatuated with that and like the mystery, right? And but I had a physiological reaction the first time, and of course I went to discover what that meant, and I got really high off of that night, and I having never talked about that before, knowing what was going on, I just tried to replicate that feeling. And so I really went down the road of like that. But I knew I was using someone. I knew that enough that I was using someone and I wasn't doing something I should have been doing. Um, and so I felt kind of like ashamed that I couldn't control myself, let's say. Because then there's people who'd be like, you should never feel ashamed for sexual exploration because that's just the world today, right? But at the end of the day, it was I knew that I had no self control, and that's what I was ashamed of. And so shame makes a person push people away, right? So I could be like, oh, I'm the victim. Everyone pushed me away. False. I pushed people away because I felt shame. And then add to that, around age 9 again, one of my best friends ever, guy friend, I had guy friends when I was little. He moved away, and I didn't have a chance to say goodbye. And like we biked around the neighborhood together, like explored the world with best friends. Something I don't think a lot of people know what it is these days anymore. That's another topic. But anyway, my heart was totally broken, and I cried. I cried for 3 days, and I remember never wanting to suffer that type of pain again. And so, on top of the shame and pushing people away, now I was pushing people away because I was afraid to get close again, because to experience the pain of loss was awful, and I didn't have an understanding of how to process it. So I kind of went into my little circle and spiral and stuff like that. And I just lived the only life I knew how to live and tried to fit in. I wanted to belong with the guys, but I still wanted to push people away. And on the surface, it looked like I played well in the sandbox, and I kind of did. But interiorly, there was a divide. So and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the divide got romanticized. It was like around grade 6. I remember thinking, if I don't if I'm not belonging with these guys like as one of the guys, or if I feel that way on the inside, maybe I would belong with them as like a girl or like a boyfriend or some romantic thing. And these boys at that age were starting to chit chat about the girls and get interested in the girls and get all that. But meanwhile, I remember noticing that I was still fawning for the affection of the guys. I was still hoping that I was trying to gain the approval of the guys while they were starting to move on into the world, right? And I look back now and say, okay, yeah, there's obviously some things that I needed to have dealt with that I didn't even know I needed to deal with back then. And those brought me down the realm to like explore those matters of like, well, am I gay? Of course, when listen to this, by the age of 11 was the first time I said I was gay because I was so bored with using porn for 2 years. The ladies on the Walmart flyer page, I was like, well, this isn't really exciting anymore. Didn't understand that it was about getting high and needing more of a dose or a different dose. So I said that to myself. The next time I said that to myself was after I got molested by a dude as a teen, and it took me 10 years to forgive the guy and stuff, and whatever. So that was a piece of freedom to forgive that guy. But I had a physiological reaction in that too, right? So now I'm a teenager thinking to myself, uh, like this must mean I'm gay. Like what's going on here? And of course, but at that point in time, I didn't. I mean, I didn't. I never wanted to be gay because back in the '80s, if you were the gay kid, like look out, you're getting picked on big time, right? Um, so I launched into like a hyper escapism mode, and that's when things um, like the sexual escapades with females like ramped through the roof. I started that stuff very young, and then I discovered online porn a few years later when online porn was readily available. And then I, was, I even rationalized at some point that it's like, well, I could do this. It's less destructive, even though it's still super destructive, And to feed into what causes the demand for that is awful, and it's a wicked industry, as in wicked evil. But anyway, the third time I came out to myself was after I hit like the rock bottom of despair, thinking like this is this is who I am. I was like 27. I found myself like looking at. I was like, I'm gonna look at this gay porn stuff just to see if maybe then I'll just know, right? Um, and I looked at it and I was fixated, but I was like, I feel like I'm watching. I'm not enjoying this. I'm watching like a train fall off a cliff. Like you can't look away. You're fixated, and I didn't know how to process that, and I just kind of accepted it. Like I guess this is who I am, right? And so I just kind of quietly went through the procedure of like surrendering any idea that I ever could become a husband and father, right? Um, that was probably the worst one. I mean, yeah, like, oh, what do I tell my parents? You know, like I didn't look forward to that. But really, what really like dropped me to like rock bottom was believing the lie that because these questions about my life experience and how I could belong. Really, it was a journey of trying to find out where I belonged. Okay,
Mhm.
but that would somehow exclude me from forever exclude me from one day becoming a husband and father in a natural marriage to an opposite sex spouse. Um, so
That's
I love that.
interesting that were experiencing the same sex attractions, but long to be a husband and father.
Oh,
That's
totally.
it's a really interesting connection there.
That's super common among so many dudes that have those questions. It's like,
Really?
and because a lot, I mean, you know, have does a straight person say, "Oh, I wonder why I'm straight"? You know, does like people, like, what is the origin of how we're drawn to people? You know, I know for me, and many of the people that have come to me with their stories, a lot of it had to do with um, relational, how much I say, relational appetites. The relational appetites are influenced, right? I mean, everybody knows this. You know, if you had um, let's say someone has a really bad abusive boyfriend one time, right? Then they just kind of like lay off that they might, or a father, they might distance them from men. The other, I mean, they might boomerang and like stick with them too, right? But I'm just saying that like our relational appetites are influenced by the types of relationships we have and that we're
Mhm.
subject to as children, even, you know. And I mean, my house was my I grew up in a stable home that was relationally nourishing, but what I didn't have was the peer to peer nourishing relationship, at least not in the way that I needed or expected. And I think there's something to be said about the role of expectations in there too, because I don't know if it was from witnessing my brother be successful in school and social activity and stuff that I thought, well, that's how it would be for me too, right? And it wasn't. And so my expectations weren't met. So I was downcast and people didn't want to play with me as much. And then I just felt more and more distance from being able to develop in healthy relationships, period. And then
Mhm.
you add that shame and the fear of loss on top of that, you know? Oh
Yeah.
man, what a mess to sort out. Thank God for God because like again, a ton of little experiences with Jesus would just come into my heart and be like, I'm here and I love you and you're lovable just as you are, and I'm calling you to ongoing growth. Uh, yeah.
What was your perception of the church during that time then?
um, well, my catechesis and formation was as good as anyone's could have been in the 80s and 90s, let's say. If you know, you know. Well, I didn't understand where the church was at on any of this stuff because I had never learned about it. All I had seen was the idea, you know, like male and female created them. Great, you know, that's moms and dads work together and make a family, and that's awesome. Um, I did get saturated with the idea that, well, the church must hate me because this is who I am, right? And I absolutely did for some time, as in like for a piece of time, but not a long time, take on this idea that, you know, I'm some I'm some victim here from a church that imposes its will upon people like me. Like I took on all that garbage, you know? And it just made me like a little closet activist, you know? And I never like went to town doing activism stuff, but it really stirred up resentment in my heart.
Mhm.
So, but what, like I said, what undid that was encountering actual people instead of ideological ideas or doing keyboard warrior stuff. I actually met real people who seemed to love me, and I'm like, wait a second, the church is supposed to not love me. Why do you love me? Like, what's going on, right? And so I knew there was more to the story, right? The whole story could be called more to the story, right? Especially with talking about like the breadth of the beauty of the Catholic faith. And these people
Mhm.
radiated a peace and a joy that I absolutely craved because I was just like absent of peace interiorly, right? I mean,
Mhm.
on the surface, you know, I fit into society in some ways, right? So unless I was to reveal to someone the pains on my heart, they would never have known. And there was a pain. There was pains of the lack of belonging, you know,
Mhm.
feeling like I didn't belong. So yeah, these people
So
radiated peace and joy, and I was just like, I want this, whatever. And then they brought me back to prayer, and I prayed my first rosary in like 20 years, and um, yeah, it was amazing. And I saw vulnerability from other men in a safe context, And I remember I was at this retreat, and one guy stood up and shared something that was kind of vulnerable, and then that gave me the courage to be the next guy to stand up, and I shared something that was, it wasn't even about the sexuality stuff. It was just something
Mhm.
that was humbling and vulnerable in a safe place for men. And I know not all men are comfortable with that sort of situation, but in this case, that's what I needed. And I was like, as the 1,000 pounds of bricks like lifted off my chest, I was like, I need to put to words what's on my heart so that I can keep lifting these bricks off. And little did I realize, even at that time, that this was like a form of me cooperating with God's grace, because we speak truth, we speak light, speak the truth, and it shines a light on the darkness and the shame, and it dissipates it, right? So,
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit to the role of men helping other men in these types of situations and helping them, yeah, work through all of it?
uh, sure, I'll do my best, I guess. So, it what I've experienced in my story is feeling a draw. I'm like, I need to find out what these guys are about because I want to be like them, right? And
Mhm.
at that state in time, I had just, let's say, come to the other side of the mountain of thinking like, oh, woe is me, like why do I feel excluded by men? When will some man come and notice me like shivering and shaking as a broken man and just like rescue me, right? I had to get past that, like I am a victim mindset. It is
Mhm.
so crippling. It's so crippling. And it's so sad to see people. It's like a manifestation of entitlement, right? And really realizing that, like, no one owes us anything. Like, I had to really adjust my expectations of the whole world. It's like, I want to survive, to serve the Lord, but when I'm dealing with human beings who've got problems of their own and issues of their own, I can't wait for someone to like look upon me with love before I strive to grow up as a man, really. I needed to grow up. I mean, I still need to grow up in ways, but the idea that like I was just fine the way it was, like, we were raised in the 80s and 90s, you're just fine the way you are. What a crock of garbage. It's like God loves us exactly where we are, and he loves everybody exactly where they are because God is the fullness of limitless love. But that doesn't mean we're okay where we are, right? And so, um, like I said, I had to get past this idea of like, um, that I could just wait around and somehow magically my life would change. I had to like, okay, these guys radiate some, what I could say now is some gravitas. I wanted to grow. I had to become aware of my need to grow as a man, and so that's what it is. And then I know a lot of people, they come, or even like where I was, it's like I moved away from that group, and so now what? Oh, I'm in the big city and there is no group. It's like, what did Mother Teresa say? Like, where there is no love, put love, or something like that. It's like, well, where there is no thing, connect with other guys and try to make something. And that's tough for guys who experience high anxiety or who have never been brought into the fold of manhood, right? But through the cross and through Christ, especially by striving to grow in the fullness of virtue and holiness, which of course brings us to do the most difficult things, instead of like trembling in fear and anxiety, that makes heroes out of men, and those men will find each other once they get on that road, and that's how new pockets of excellence comes to be, uh, wherever they are. So I'm not afraid of like leaving my community where we have this amazing thing going on with excellent, men's community, because I know I'm just going to go somewhere else and build it again. Whereas like years ago, I wasn't there. I was afraid of losing what I thought I had. You know.
Mhm. I know that I was listening to your interview on the Dr. J show, and you were mentioning that a community of men really inspired you and helped you along the path. Did they ever affirm or validate you in healthy ways, and what did that look like?
Uh, I, I'm trying to make sense of the idea of like affirm or validate, because like basically I could put it like this: in the times when I was manifesting, let's say flamboyant emotional dysregulation, let's say, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think that was kind of like a repellent of guys. The guys that I wanted to like belong with and grow from, and I'm talking. They were not interested in hanging out with a guy like me, and that's just fine. That's where they're at. And so there was a realization point where, again, working on myself and striving to grow and learn about the virtue of temperance, right? Self-regulation,
Mhm.
doing what's hard, not just indulging in every next emotional like outburst. That
Mhm.
brought me to be a lot more even keel, let's say. And then it became easier to talk to these guys. It became easier to relate healthily in conversation. Of course, this is alongside like observing and being around them and listening to them, right? Because life's not all about me. I had to like listen and like take interest in other people, when I was like enwrapped in this idea that being gay and being trans is who I am, like I was pretty close to being staring at my belly button most of the time. I mean, I still struggle with selfishness, like there's no doubt about it. But like that was really bad in those times. So yeah, so in terms of that support or affirmation, I guess it was more
Do you
so
want me to
like,
clarify?
well, I was just saying, it was more like welcome to the fold of the wolf pack once I kind of leveled up out of my dysregulation in a sense.
Okay. Yeah, because I was about to say, because I know that when you were talking about your story of feeling like you were always second best, so I guess I was asking, and you just sort of answered that of feeling like you were finally welcome to the fold and
Hmm.
like could see eye to eye with the guys around you, and you weren't the
Yeah, and,
second
and
rate
I,
one.
I was able. I remember one time realizing like, wait a second, I'm not putting guys on a pedestal anymore, as though they're like some untouchable like hope for me to one day become. I'm like, I actually feel like I belong in this, and not only do I belong, I belong as one of the organizers, one of the overseers. I have a gift to give. I can help
Mhm.
expand this network, this amazing network, through my gifts and talents, in a way that can give back and build other men.
Do you think there's a way that the community can help someone who's struggling with that dysregulation get to that point, or is it something that they really need to realize that they need help within themselves and do their own personal work before getting there?
I think it's a combination of both, because
Okay.
imagine if you had two parallel universes, and let's say good guys, good group of guys, and then dysregulated guy in both. Good group of guys and then dysregulated guy. In one, the good group of guys are like, "Hey man, that thing that you did, it was kind of off key, right?
Mhm.
I'm telling you this because you seem to be a good guy, and it would be maybe more appropriate to do it this way instead of that way." Now, the dysregulated person will either be like, la 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 la, I'm too much into myself to receive fraternal correction, or they'll be like, oh, I never thought of that. I appreciate that. Um, Iron sharpens iron. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on with our lives. And sometimes those are difficult conversations, and I've been part of them on several sides, um, but they're necessary. But what's also necessary is for the person who let's say there's something to be aimed at for personal growth, for them to be open.
Mhm.
But that's also important to let's say highlights the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who are literally, not literally, I mean actually striving for the fullness of holiness and virtue, and not who are just doing Catholic looking things, because you can have a seriously wicked heart and still do Catholic looking things. I know because I've done that. But now I'm striving to grow in the fullness of virtue, and a fruit of growing in the fullness of virtue is Catholic looking things, but that's a one way highway. Catholic looking things does not bring about a heart of virtue necessarily.
Mhm.
So if there's men who are striving to grow in the fullness of virtue, and if people don't know what that means, they should look up what virtue means. Like Catechism 1803, 1806, they talk about virtue and then talks about how what type of virtues, the moral virtues need to be striven for, and that would be the virtue like your cardinal virtues, and temperance is one of those things. And like I don't want to be around guys who disregard the necessity of striving to grow in virtue anymore, right? Because those guys are just going to bring me down into complete destruction, the destruction that I clawed my way out of before, you
Yeah.
know.
I heard a priest one time say that saints grow in bunches like grapes. And basically the
I
idea of,
love
yeah, the
joking
people that,
about that. It's like and Saint Curtis and Saint Hudson and Saint Dominic, we all hung out together and had beers and cigars, and like they're gonna write about that one day. We hope.
Yeah, I mean, like so many saints, it's like they don't find them alone. They're not off growing by themselves.
Yeah,
They've got Francis and Clare, you've got Benedict and Scholastica. They're helping each other get there,
yeah,
and the importance of having friends that will help you strive
yeah,
in virtue together.
yeah, exactly. And like the relational environment you put yourself in will influence, like what is it? You're like the five people you hang out with, really?
Yeah.
Like I have some play, I have some influence in who I hang out with now. I'm not like 5 years old. I can. So it's up to me. It's this idea of like, oh, I'm so helpless on how my life's turning out. It's like, okay, I've been there. It's like sob story, but it's not true. The next chapter of anyone's life, the next chapter of your life is not yet written, and you hold the pen to some degree. You can write a lot of. You might not be able to write the journey. You can write down the story of how you handle it.
Mhm. Yeah. Did your experiences change your perception of marriage? And if so, is there like anything specific that has like that you appreciate more now or anything like that?
Um, well, for one thing,
Just kind of threw that one at you.
I've been able to see past the lie that just because I've had questions about my identity, and I even took on the mindset of being gay and trans at one point and all that stuff, that I'm forever automatically excluded from potentially ever marrying the church or an opposite sex spouse in a holy natural marriage. And there's a lot of people who refuse to give people the possibility of understanding that that is still a possibility for their lives, and it drives me nuts. Like when I see and hear about people who are despairing, it's because, well, I'm gay. This is who I am, and this is who I forever must be. Life sucks. God must have just given me the short straw, and what a sadistic God we have. But I'm going to behave like a good Catholic anyway, and just like white knuckle it, and like deny my nature of who I perceive I am. So it's a perceived nature. It's a false nature. And just deny it. And so they're caught in this like mental gymnastics, and that's even being pushed by some Catholic groups who I won't even name. But at the end of the day, oh, this is going to be real harsh. When I hear about Catholics who are unaliving themselves, they're the ones who have bought into that. The ones who have walked away from this mindset controlling their sense of being and their origin and their identity and their destination, they're not doing that. And that's something nobody's talking about. It's tragic. It's totally tragic. I don't want people to lose hope ever, especially not to the point of saying, well, this is the best it's ever going to get. I'm better off dead.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, God brings about transformation and healing, and there is grace and there's always hope. And like, you're supposed to carry your cross, but there's grace to carry that. And
Mm-hmm.
someday you might be released from that, or it might get lighter. And God knows, like, He never pushes you further than you can handle. And He doesn't want you to suffer in just stick in suffering. The suffering is always to be transformed into love.
That's right. Suffering's transformative. And even that whole thing about marriage, like, and it's not about like, oh, great, all attractions are the other way are magically gone. It's not even like that. With the people that I know who've awakened to the idea that hey, I'm not actually automatically excluded from holy marriage. And some of them have pursued it and have gotten married and have started families, and they're 20 years down that road. They'll acknowledge it's like, yeah, from time to time, like that echo of a memory comes, or I have that moment or whatever, or the attractions didn't fully ever go away, but they just let's say were reordered in terms of how a person understands what to do with themselves, right? It's like, it's taught me to surrender to the cross more, and to love the design of God more, and to understand that I need to spend more time with my same sex peers in holy friendship to fulfill that need of this, so I don't start looking at it in a romantic way and things like that. So it's again, it's not about an attraction ever vanishing. I mean, God could do that in a snap if he wanted to,
Mhm.
but I think it's just for the people that I'm talking to, or the people who are coming to me and talking. It's just about saying, yeah, whatever. So they still exist. Who cares? I'm not going to let that stop me from having a beautiful family and a beautiful life, and just going forward with it, because I know my heart is locked on pursuing a heart of the Lord, virtue, chastity, especially is one of the biggest things that they understand the successful. I can't think of the word. The successful integration of their sexuality is the primary desire now, even though they still might have a trickling of a longing that has just been there forever. So
Mhm.
it's just a change in mindset about what to do with these things. So there's a
Well,
lot
and
of
going back
freedom.
to like,
There's such freedom and joy in the people who have opened their hearts to that possibility, And what I see in the opposite side in some of these other groups is like there's even like the like like word gymnastics of words to try to navigate around ever giving someone the possibility or the idea that it could be possible that they could step out of that mindset and live a life that is like life after all of that.
Can you explain for our audience why you have a problem with the phrase struggle with same sex attraction?
Oh yeah, okay, all right, okay. So we chatted about this beforehand. And I was like, by the way, so for anyone who's listening who is navigating approaching this topic, when we say struggle with, there's an implicit assumption being made about the person who is experiencing. Now, we use the word experience because experience undoes the nuance of permanence. So it's very important to speak about experience instead of saying have attractions. That's one thing. But struggle is that a lot of people simply don't see it as a struggle. In fact, my own life, I never saw it as a struggle. It was just, it is what it is, right? So when if we're trying to authentically meet people in relationship, it doesn't help if we come at it with an assumption that is off-putting to the other person. Now, if someone's like, "I've never struggled with this," you're coming thinking that I'm struggling. So like the cards are already laid out that you're looking down on me or whatever. It's just not helpful.
Interesting.
At the same time, there are people who do see it as a personal struggle, and with that part of their story also matters. But if in a general sense, it's something to be cautious of, I would say.
So say experience same sex attraction when talking about it in general. And if you're talking with an individual who struggles, then you can talk about it with more specific language to their
Well,
experience.
if they've told you that they struggle with it, then why not, right?
Um, what advice would you have for our listeners who want to help people who are acting out on sexual sins, or who are experiencing same sex attraction? How can they help the individuals in their lives who are going through that?
I guess first thing is that experiencing a particular attraction because it's not chosen is not a committed sin. So if anyone's
Mhm.
worried about, I had this thought, I'm sinning, let's lift people out of that. Let's lift people out of that. And just, I think the number one proposal would be to um, go into anything having already been striving to live a compellingly beautiful and virtuous life ourselves, so that the person might be attracted to us and our self-regulation and our assuredness and our certitude and our fortitude and our healthy risks and our everything, so that if a person doesn't want to listen to us, it's nothing we say is going to be helpful, period. Well, I mean, you know what I'm saying. um, I think it's very important for people to remember that the experience of a particular attraction doesn't equate to a lifelong destiny of or a commitment to this means this for the rest of your life. Acknowledge the attraction exists. The church desires us to be honest, right? So be honest. Be, I mean, does it pay to tell everybody? Well, maybe not, because maybe a few years later you're like, well, I see I was wrestling with this thing and I don't see things this way anymore. And now you can't get out of it, right?
Mhm.
People won't let you leave. So I'd say just self honesty and just remembering that, especially for the young people, it's like it's really funny to watch, like, to hear some young people I hear who are like versed in a culture where chastity is not just an idea, but like thoroughly integrated in the talks that they hear and the media they listen to. Um, they're like, meh, yeah, like same sex attraction is part of my story, and so what? Like, right? They know that it's not gonna like bind them to a trajectory that they don't want. Um, but most people, I would say, are not in climates like that. In which case, maybe it would be best to help them understand that this is not about um, it's not about like LGBTQ people and non-LGBTQ people. It's really about all human beings together who have the proposal from the church to strive to grow in the fullness of virtue, regardless of whatever sexual desires or appetites or inclinations or attractions or feelings and so on that we experience. And that this is a universally given proposal. It's in all states of life, even in marriage. And this is where people have to understand. there's an opportunity to understand the difference between chastity, celibacy, and abstinence, because you can be one but not the other in all six permutations. It's wild.
Can you lay those out for our listeners? Because I don't actually know if we ever delved into that. I know it's
Sure.
probably a lot,
No,
but
no,
just like
I'll try
the
to do the quick thing.
yeah.
Chastity is about the state of the heart and our desire to conform to God's authorship of humanity. Chastity starts in the mind and the heart long before actions follow up. Same with unchastity. You can have an unchaste thought, like I reject the order of God before you act on it. So chastity is about the state of the heart. Abstinence is about doing or not doing something. And celibacy is actually a state of life. So I'm not married right now, so I'm in the celibate state, and I'm in the celibate state living abstinently, and in on a really good day, I'm living perfectly chastely, but I still struggle with sexual thoughts and sexual sin sometimes. Like I have to like one thing that really helps with that is superimposing the image of Christ on the cross, like the Good Friday cross, right on top of whatever images the demonic side is trying to like foist upon me. Anyway, so a person can be chaste without being abstinent or celibate. A person can be abstinent without being chaste or celibate, and a person can be celibate without being abstinent or chaste. They're that different. And so when people just use those words like interchangeably, it's like, hey, you're playing cards without a full deck. Like what's coming out of you is incapable of reflecting the beauty and richness of what our church actually teaches. So
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I've heard that they're different, but I'd never necessarily heard it laid out, and I don't think we've gotten into that on the podcast before. So I thought it was important for listeners to
oh, cool,
understand.
sure.
So we can have the full deck of cards.
Yeah, let's have a full deck of cards. And if there's anything I say that is like a little iffy, I just defer to the catechism, please, okay, so that you can deal with the actual full deck of cards. I am far from that. I'm trying.
Yeah, aren't we all?
Nah, I
Is
hope
there
so.
anything else?
Hmm?
Oh, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Well, I guess maybe for anyone who's got like friends or loved ones or any who's like navigating LGBTQ, whatever, just to remember that like never lose sight of the fact that this person could become the church's next great saint. Never lose sight of the fact that no one is out of the reach of God's grace and God's mercy. Never lose sight of the fact that Christ died on a cross. And if we follow him, we should expect to get crucified also. So prepare for suffering, but always remember that if we have our eyes set upon eternity, the the Lord will make it worthwhile, right? So I think I a lot of times I work with people who have not come to the realization that there's going to be suffering along the journey when you're walking with people who, let's say, are as comfortable as hugging a cactus because they've embraced activist ideological positions and they're ruining Christmas dinner and stuff like that by just being like agitatedly, obstinately unfriendly and unkind in a household, things like that, which happens sometimes, not all time, but sometimes. Um, but all people are still like beloved by God and never out of reach of His mercy and never out of reach of His love. And so, when Fiducia Supplicans came out, I was like, I, I did a real deep dive on some things, and I found my way working through things like grace. Okay, grace and graces, and basically, it's like one of the greatest ways we can give our lives to transform the world for the kingdom of God is to surrender our hearts in ways that will God will respond to by bestowing more graces upon humanity. He will throw graces across, that person who is being difficult to love. And maybe we're the ones who are difficult to love because we want to come in there, you know, ready to rock when we need to be ready to listen, whatever the case is. Um, I think the most important thing for anyone to do is just to look into the riches of our faith and say, in what way can I be a conduit of God's graces into not only my family but the whole world? Because maybe that sacrifice that you make won't be for the conversion of the heart of your child, but it could convert the heart of that soldier in other country who's about to do something merciful instead of something horrific, right? We just don't know. And that kid who's watching his family get burned to death in another war-torn country on his knees in prayer, the graces bestowed by God through that offering of suffering could go and wash over with grace the hearts of 1,000 people in the West. On this topic, we just don't know how the economy of grace works in its entirety, but we do know that if we prioritize surrendering our hearts in ways that will be a sensible conclusion that God will, because a loving Father gives more than what we can give Him, that He'll give back graces to the world, then we're on the right track. And it'll also simmer us down, because I know a lot of people, they're like, well, this is the way it is and blah blah. It's like, good luck having a real relationship with someone. Interestingly, one thing I think is valuable is, like, if you couldn't say something to someone's face, don't say it. Don't like, remove it from your style of approach. you know and I've been blessed with the opportunity to sit down with people, Catholics, who are very differently minded on this, and we can go and sit down and have a 2-hour breakfast conversation still, even though I'm like I'm worried that this person's going to go to hell, and they're probably worried I'm going to go to hell if they believe hell exists, which they probably don't. But but it's like, people who don't think like you, it could be a sign that if people who don't quite think like you still are seeking you out to talk and to have you listen to them, that might be a sign that you're on the right track in terms of, like, managing yourself as you navigate this difficult topic. And a lot of families have been hurt a lot by this in many directions. So,
Mhm.
through forgiveness comes freedom. Through forgiveness comes restoration of relationship. And I mean, if people don't find us attractive in our countenance and being, why would they want anything to do with the God that, that's what they would say, like, who is this God that you're judgmental, awful? They wouldn't want anything to do with what we have to propose if they're not first open to us as people.
That's beautiful. It's so important to be able to have those relationships and meet people and see them for the human beings that God's created them to be, and to be able to, find something to connect with them there
Mhm.
and build those relationships. Because a phrase that I love is, the rules without relationships breeds rebellion. That, like, ultimately all of the rules that the church has are for the sake of relationships. So if we're following the rules but not working on forming any types of relationships, it's not quite the approach that we're supposed to have.
That's right. That's right. I agree.
So, well, thank you so much, Hudson, for being on the show today. This has been a really great conversation. Yeah, thank you.
It's been a total pleasure to hang out.
Yeah. And if you have any, I can link your website in the bio as well if anyone wants to check that out. So,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
and to all of our listeners, please like and subscribe. Check out the new ebooks we have coming out. Leave us a 5-star review and keep on living the culture of love. God bless.